Hi everybody, welcome back for another video. You know, we Americans, we have strong opinions about freedom, a land of the free, a home of the brave, but sometimes you need to get out of America, go visit another place. We went to Central Europe, took a road trip, drive from Berlin down to Munich, and saw a lot of really important history on the front lines of freedom. And there's a lot to learn about the history, and there's a lot to see. So we got in our BMW from our rental car and we hit the road, and we really I'm going to bring to you some really interesting observations as we go through some very important historical cities in Europe, and we talk about freedom and our understanding of freedom as Americans and where the rubber really meets the road in Central Europe. Now, Berlin is just one of those interesting cities that we had to go to first because it was literally split down the middle between East Germany and West Germany. There's a lot of history here, and I'm not a historian, and the goal of this video is certainly not to tell you lots of history, but I want to try to understand what these folks went through. I think there's a lot of folks that live along this line, along Germany, into the Czech Republic. And these people went through a lot of change in the last 100 years. We're also going to dip a little bit into Austria, which is basically a country that remains independent and neutral. And then we're going to come back into Munich. This is one of the metro stops where we spent a little bit of time. We looked around. Germany is a very interesting country because I was just blown away by the technology and how clean and how efficient the city was run. Their metro and the subway transportation was just exceptional, and you'll see some images. This is an important square right here, so let's take a minute and listen. There was actually a protest going on across the square. So from what I heard, Hitler used to have get up on those stairs in that square and have large crowds and give speeches. So here we went up in this cathedral up at the top, and then we have a skyline 360-degree view of Berlin. And then at the end, after we survey the entire Berlin, we're going to come back around to the square, and you can see right down there. That square was just filled with Nazi party members at one point in history. And it's just an important area to just see and to remember all of the atrocities and the things that happened. The thing I like about Berlin is there's a lot of memorials, and I'm going to show you a few of those. And there's a lot of changes that they've done in the country and in the city to honor those that were killed, and to provide history and important lessons and important information. It's all out there for everyone to see. Everyone is stopping by to see it, and it's not. It's a way that the country heals, and I think that's very important. Now, Germany is one of those countries that is in NATO, and they're all in on this concept of open borders and allowing people to come in, and they're dealing with a lot of concerns related to that, a lot of the same issues that we're dealing with here in the United States. There's just a policies and mindset they're very different from a country with solid borders. And there are some other countries that we're going to go into which are very different in their philosophy, which are more right-wing, like the Czech Republic. They've gone through so many times where they fight for democracy, and then Hitler came in and took them over, and then they now have gotten democracy again, and they don't want to let it go. And they're concerned about their border. They allow firearms, and they encourage firearm ownership. There are severe restrictions on firearms, require a lot of registration. There's also severe joule limits on air guns as well. So let's transition now to see one of the really important memorials. I'm going to be quiet here. This is the Holocaust Memorial. It is a very solemn place. Let's just take a chance to watch and look. Okay, now with that, let's take a train and we're going to go over to the Berlin Wall. There are still some pieces of the Berlin Wall that remain up, and they're more of like just a reminder of what happened in the past. And this is one of the longest stretches right here. There's only about 2 or 3 places where you can find a piece of the wall, and there's 2 they're fairly long that we went to, and there's 1 piece that's at one of the plazas. And so this was on a weekend day. There's a number of people there strolling around. So we went from there over to another piece, and this piece is in a different part of town, and it has a bunch of really interesting memorials and information, and you can just walk along the line and see in a chronology of what happened in the 30s and the 40s, the history that led up to a person like Hitler taking over. All of that history is just, it's really important for people to know, and I think it really hits home when you're there and you're actually at the wall and you're reading that history and you're in the country. It's different from reading it in a textbook here. And I think it's really important that we understand everything that went on, because there was a lot of step-by-step things that happened, rights that were taken away, and power taken by the government incrementally, step by step, over a period of years. And I know that there are people today in America that say, I can see these things happening step by step. You're slowly losing your freedoms. Well, it can happen. And I think it's a warning sign when you go and you examine what happened in these other countries and you see how it was taken away and how they handed over power to a person who was essentially setting up an authoritarian, genocidal regime. And so I think it's really important that we understand that and we step back and we examine things that are happening. And, you know, they had kings, and this is a Sanssouci, the palace, and these are just really grand places that are still there in Europe, and the kings and the castles, they're still there, and people enjoy going to see how these people lived. But these were authoritarian monarchies where all the power was in the king's hands, and the people were secondary way down the line. And that's not a democracy, and that's not what we strive for. That's not freedom. So I think these are things that we can appreciate. These are history, but we don't want to go back there. This is really some of the most beautiful country, though. It's rolling hills, and as you go further south, you're getting into the Bavaria region, and there's a lot of castles up on the hills. Now, this city that we're in right here, when we went from there to Prague in the Czech Republic, I'm really impressed with this city because it is one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. I've been several places. I've been to Paris, I've been to London, I've been to Rome, but this place stands out as being just spectacular. And I have to say, my wife and daughter were there before. They told me, you got to come here. They went back and they brought me this time, and we checked it out. So this is a beautiful city. You see, I saw so many beautiful cathedrals, and I saw so many beautiful castles. They all roll together after a while, but it's a really important place in the world. Central Europe has so much history and so much beauty, and a lot of this survived the war. There was a lot going on, a lot of destruction, a lot of fires and bombings, and almost every place we went, there was a portion of the building that was reconstructed, or there was parts of the art and the decoration that was replaced. But there was, it makes you appreciate the parts that were maintained even more, because they still stood through those wars and stood through bombings, and really important. So the Czech people, as I mentioned earlier, they hold on to firearms. Firearm ownership is a right in the country, and it is very unique in Europe, other than Switzerland and a few other places, including United States of America. Only places that really value and have essentially in their constitution a right to bear arms. And I think I feel a sort of a kinship with the Czech Republic, and I know that these are people that want to fight for their freedom. We went outside of Prague to a little town called CK Town, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the name. You saw it there. A beautiful little town with another castle. We went up on the hill, got some great views, and I'll show you those right here, and I'll be quiet for a minute. They even have their own bear in the castle, which is really interesting. So then I pose the question to you, what is freedom? Does freedom mean the ability to congregate, to move, to have your profession, to essentially be free in what you do and what you say? But also, does it give you the right to defend yourself? Does it give you the right to own a firearm? Americans would argue that's an inherent God-given right, and the government doesn't give us that, but it is in our Constitution. Does it make us safer or more free because we have the right to bear arms? I think you can make a strong argument that we have the ability to protect ourselves individually, or we can form a militia and we can then fight, if we had to, against a rogue government that was being taken over. There's a lot of context there. But I think that freedom, according to the Freedom Index, and it's something I've been reading about, America is actually only listed as number 17 on the Freedom Index. And there's a lot of other countries that are higher, and then there are countries that like Germany and a lot of the Central European countries are all very similar to the United States. So what makes you free? What's the Freedom Index? I don't know enough about that index, but I think it's something you should look up because you might learn something very important. I think that there are a lot of parameters and check boxes for freedom, and firearms are one of them, but there's a long list of other freedoms that everyone wants, and if you tally them all up, America was ranked number 17. So America, a lot of people think, well, maybe it's the most free place in the world, it's the land of the free, but when you really take an analytical approach to it, it's not necessarily at the top. Now we're in Salzburg. So we're in Austria, which is a country that stays apolitical. They're not in NATO. They don't have alliances. They try to remain neutral. They have the old castle up there on the hill. And when we were here, we went up on this fortress and we got a great view of the city. And it was very interesting. There was a party going on up there with the Red Bull company, which I think is based, I saw Red Bull everywhere in Europe. I think it is based in Austria. Correct me if I'm wrong. but there was this party going on, and legend has it that the party is still going on as everybody was drinking Red Bull that night. As you can see right there, the party was really all lit up, and they were having a good time. So this is a country that I've been to. I've been to Vienna several times. I really love Austria. It is just the most culturally advanced. There's lots of music. There's obviously the home of Mozart. There's a lot to like there as well. And so we had to go visit Salzburg because we had never been to that part of Austria before. So from there, we're basically in the Bavarian region of Germany, Austria, in the edge of the Swiss Alps that run down as well. So you've got the Alps running through Germany and Austria. And we went on our way to Munich, and that's where I finished my stop before my wife and daughter kept going to Switzerland. I came back. But in Munich, I did have a chance to go visit the site of the 1972 Olympics, where there was also another massacre, and there's a memorial. And so we're going to take a minute and listen.
Im Wohnbereich der Israelis einen Menschen erschossen. Ob es weitere Tote gibt, ist im Augenblick noch nicht bekannt.
Die Meldung zu und stellten die Frage, ob nunmehr die Olympischen Sommerspiele überhaupt fortgesetzt werden können. In diplomatischen Kreisen hieß es wörtlich, dass die Bundesrepublik Deutschland
Forderungen, die sie stellen. Danach verlangen die Guerillas die Freilassung aller in israelischer Haft befindlichen palästinensischen Guerillas bis 12 Uhr Mittag. Sie sollen damit gedroht haben, die Geiseln zu erschießen, falls ihr Ultimatum nicht fristgerecht erfüllt wird. Sie verlangten ferner die Bereitstellung eines Flugzeugs.
Now, Munich was a great city. There's a lot of people in Munich. It's really a densely packed city. This was a really interesting site for the Olympics. Everything was preserved and still being used. I've been to some other places where the Olympic Village and the Olympic sites are all decaying. Here in Atlanta, there's very few, if any, of those sites that are being used anymore. And I've been to some other cities where it was very similar after many years. But here they're actually being used. We went into the swimming pool area, and there were people swimming in there, and it was being used, and it was beautiful. And so it's really a great planning and use of their facilities. A lot of people getting around on bicycles in a very efficient way. A lot of trams, trains, public transportation. America needs to learn these types of city designs, because what we have is a very different suburban layout that is not conducive to city growth. They have an inner city that's dynamic with lots of people, and an inner city that is easily accessible by public transportation that is safe and effective. We need that in America. We can learn from some of these older cities that have sort of retrofit and have modernized. America needs to do the same thing. We need to try to do that. We need people to live in the city and not live far out in the suburbs. And maybe we also need beer gardens like this. As a non-drinker, I was a little out of place, but this was an amazing site. This was a weekend. There were people everywhere drinking beer, eating pretzels, and I'm going to leave it with that. It's a very interesting city, Munich. All right, so I'm going to wrap this one up. This is a view inside of a thing called BMW World. It's right next to BMW headquarters in Munich. Very interesting new models of cars there. A lot to see as well. If you're ever in Munich, check it out. Everybody, I hope I was able to convey some important information and also provide some entertaining travel around Germany and in Central Europe. Everybody be safe, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. One shot. You got it.
That was anticlimactic.